the Tower of London, the perfect place to start today's walk, a journey into London's deep past, a walk through time. So today we're going to go for a walk through Tudor London using this map of London in 1520. This is the map I picked up at one of the buildings that would have been in London in 1520, the Charterhouse there, the Charterhouse Museum. So before I get going, I highly recommend that you go along to the Charterhouse Museum and pick up this beautiful map if you're interested in it. They've also got the map of medieval London, and it's a really beautiful reconstruction. As it says in its text, it's a reconstruction of a city that no longer exists, a city that has vanished. But has it vanished? We're going to walk through some of the surviving areas of Tudor London, or look for some of the remnants or the echoes of the London of Henry VIII, the London of Thomas Cromwell, if you've been binge watching Wolf Hall like I have, which is partly the inspiration for today's walk. So we're starting here at the Tower of London, which is one of the buildings that would have been here at the time this map was, well, it's a reconstruction of the city, but this is one of the buildings that would have existed at that time that is still here. There are a number of others, and we will take some of those in, whilst also looking at the footprints of some of the more significant buildings that were here. Well, this is one of the things with having a map in a windy city like London. So we're down here at the Tower of London, and this is just half of that. This is the bottom half here. What's interesting is the amount of the City of London that was owned or controlled by religious buildings. Of course, this is pre-Reformation of the Church, of course. So by, say, 1560, 1580, this map would have looked very different. But the pink and the pale pink buildings are religious buildings of some description or another. Some of them obviously are churches, some of them are almshouses or the residences of bishops or other church type properties, leper hospitals, etc. So I thought what we would do to start is make our way from the obvious landmark, the Tower of London, which is just over there. And then I thought we would go up here to Crutched Friars, up Seething Lane, which is interesting. The names, you can recognise them. This is Seething Lane, up Seething Lane, and then we would go to Crutched Friars. What a great name. And then we'll work our way from there through it. I think we'll use it. We've got the halls, the livery halls, which some of them were in existence on the same site in 1520. Some of them were about to profit from the dissolution of the monasteries in the coming years, but not yet at this point. And of course, the wonderful All Hallows by the Tower, Barking, was here in 1520 as well. In fact, this building here sits on the site of some of the oldest kind of built fabric in the whole of London, some Anglo-Saxon masonry still on this site. And of course, All Hallows by the Tower brings up the point that they make in the map. There's a wonderful text that comes with the map, which is where a lot of my information is going to be coming from today. So all credit to the Historic Towns Association. I'll put all the information below. But they say that the street plan of Tudor London owed more to the Anglo-Saxon city than it did the Roman city. That was the street plan that the Tudor city was laid out along. And here in Trinity Square Gardens, you'd have had another of the more macabre sites of Tudor London, the site of the Tower of London scaffold, where many a person met their grisly end. And around the edge of this little square here, we have the names of some of the people that perished, some of them very famous. We've got Edward Plantagenet, Earl of Warwick, Sir Thomas More down there. Again, another great Wolf Hall reference. It was in 1535. Edward Stafford, 3rd Duke of Buckingham, 1521. So just after the map was the date of the map. Edward Plantagenet was in 1499. Thomas Cromwell. Well, Thomas Cromwell, sorry, that's a little bit of a spoiler, isn't it, for anybody watching the TV series Wolf Hall. He was executed here in 1540, shortly after becoming Earl of Essex. And there were still fragments of the Roman city too in 1520. The wall, sections of the wall, apart from the bit along Thames Street, which had eroded previously, but large sections of the Roman wall still existed, along with the gates, the entrances and exits to the city. Well, entrances really. Obviously, some of it still remains to this day. Some of the Roman wall is still here, and I have walked along the Roman wall. So we'll go up here along Seething Lane, and the eagle-eyed of you will remember when we walked along here, when I followed the original, the first lost river of London, the Lortbourne, which is already buried before 1520, and that passes through here, basically I think through the gardens. What was wonderful about that Lortbourne video and the walk was that one of the pieces of evidence for the existence of that river and the fact it flowed through this area was the fact that a lady had built a bridge over the river without permission. And I go into the history of that, but that there is still a ceremony which commemorates that event and a tax that was placed upon the company of watermen and lightermen by the Lord Mayor of London of a rose cut from this garden here. I've described it badly there, it's described a lot better in the original video. But as a consequence, I was invited to take part in the Knollys Rose Festival, which was back in June, I believe, which was a really remarkable thing to be part of. I was overwhelmed. What's not clear to anybody at all is why exactly the company of watermen and lightermen are required to pay that tax, if you like, that fine of the rose cut from this garden here. It was originally the garden. I can't remember the lady's name actually off the top of my head. I'm still here with Samuel Pepys. Not around in 1520. He's much later. There's a big truck reversing here, right near near St Olaf's Church. I need to talk about St Olaf's Church. That's also a feature from the 1520 city. Again, it's in the Lortbourne video, and also in a City of London churches video as well. So we've come up Seething Lane into Hart Street, and looking here to the right, you can see the gardens and the church of Crutched Friars with all the kitchen garden, the convent garden, and that would have sat along to the right of the frame here, which is fascinating, isn't it? And one of the things I'm interested in looking for today, if there's any kind of markers or remnants of even buildings that will have gone, is there something still here, like the main gate there? I wonder what's at the site of the main gate. The Crutched Friar pub there on the other side of the road from the friary itself. This is basically the site of Crutched Friars. Now here's a name to conjure. French Ordinary Court, opposite Crutched Friars, and there is a place here on the map, a little alleyway there that leads into the manor of Blanche Appleton. I feel like I have to go that way. What's that over there? Just behind the railway bridge. It's interesting, I'm seeing things I've never noticed before, even though I've walked around here recently making a video. That's the thing, isn't it? When you engage in these processes, it opens up new perspectives on the city. This is a classic kind of psychogeographical technique for a derive, is to take an out-of-date map or an old map of places that no longer exist and walk that city. It's one of the classics that I think the Situationist International used to do in Paris in the 50s and 60s. So yeah, it's great, and you know, we'll discover things that have nothing to do with Tudor London. Look at this street here. So this is Savage Gardens, which I started to walk up the bottom end of this, but didn't realise it extended through here. Isn't this delightful? And you've got some old kind of warehouse buildings here. Obviously definitely not Tudor, but What's interesting is this curve in the road here you can see up ahead is reflected in the 1520 map as well, except that on the 1520 map everything to the left there were gardens reaching as far as Fenchurch Street to the left. So we're going to walk up to Aldgate and Aldgate Street and come back along Fenchurch Street and pick up some of those other buildings. The population of London in 1520 was 50,000, which made it the biggest city in England and one of the biggest cities in Europe, if not the world. But it's an interesting moment in time to reconstruct London at 1520 because a number of things were about to happen which radically reshaped the city itself. 1520, so Henry VIII had been on the throne for 11 years. He was still probably happily married to Catherine of Aragon. Thomas Cromwell was about to move into his mansion at Austin Friars. No idea that he'd end up at the scaffold at Tower Hill 20 years later. But this city on the map here looks radically different by 1600 or certainly by the Victorian period. There was a population explosion, which meant that by 1600, just 80 years later, the population of London was 200,000. Not just London in the city, but also it broke out into the suburbs, into the fields around the city. One of the factors there was the dissolution of the monasteries. So on the map, all that kind of pink, shades of pink land that belonged to monastic buildings, nunneries, various other church buildings, a lot of that, the monasteries were dissolved, and much of that building went into private hands, passed the crown, and the crown sold them often to wealthy courtiers who did very well out of it because they managed to get that property in the 1530s, 1540s before the population explosion hit, and that value of that property absolutely boomed. Some of the monastic buildings became simple churches, and we've been walking around the city churches, haven't we, as well, and seeing that some of them predate this 1520 map. But all those bits of pink would suddenly look quite different. And of course, every one of those churches or monasteries, nunneries, they had gardens and courtyards and open spaces. And another event that radically rechanged the fabric of the 1520 city of Tudor London of 1520 was the Great Fire of London of 1666, which destroyed 2/3 of the fabric of the city of London, which is astonishing, isn't it? 2/3. In the 19th century we have the coming of the railways, and in World War II we have the Blitz. Just on the other side of the road there, near where those bikes are parked, you had the Aldgate, the Roman gate, one of the entrances to the city, and the Roman wall ran north just along the side of that, the course of the Roman wall, which again I walked that a couple of years ago, an amazing walk, and I'll link below to that video. And next to the gate you had the site of the Holy Trinity Priory, and there's plaques, information on the wall over there. And we covered that in the Lortbourne video as well. And just where the road splits here into Leadenhall Street and Fenchurch Street, we have the Aldgate Pump, or the site of the Aldgate Pump, which is one of the ancient water sources of the City of London. It's not marked on the Tudor map and the 1520 map, but apparently it is marked on a map of 1574. So we'll go down Leadenhall Street, which was Aldgate Street in the 1520 map. That's interesting here, this alley, Hart's Horn Alley. That is on the 1520 map, but it's called Hart's Home Alley, which is interesting. Catherine Cree Church, which is on the 1520 map. I wonder if these objects, someone will be walking around in 500 years looking for the site of the Gherkin and whatever nickname we've given that aberration to humanity. So here we have the site of the Tylers and Bricklayers Hall from 1538 until 1883, so just after the map, the date of the map. And it's interesting that there were the growth of the company and livery halls started around the 1400s. There were 4 or 5 in 1400, and by 1520 there were around 40 of them. And they then started to pick up some of the former religious ecclesiastical buildings after the dissolution of the monasteries. Billiter Street here is a survivor of Tudor London. Then it was called Billiter Lane, so it hasn't really changed its name very much. So that we have St Andrew Undershaft on the other side of the road there, a really wonderful church. What I love is on the junction of the road here there was a maypole socket, so people pranced around the maypole right here, which is a lovely thing, isn't it? Lovely image to have. And there's a big film shoot in that building over there. They've soaked the pavement for some reason, so it's obviously raining in the scene they're shooting, I'd say. What I love as well is it's got the name of some of the pubs. You've got the Pewter Pot, which was just back there on Leadenhall Street. Along here, the Pope's Head, next to the Cardinal's Hat. Oh, they're great names. Obviously got the usual ones, the George Inn there. Another branch of the Cardinal's Hat. Was it a chain? The Tabard, not the famous one. The Crown, pretty obvious. Leadenhall Market was also on this site in 1520. Not this gorgeous building here, which is Victorian, but there was a market here, and also this site was in use in the Roman period as well, which came up in excavations and is continuing to be discovered in ongoing excavations on this site. So this is a very ancient part of London here. So we're going to continue along Cornhill, which is one of the significant topographical features of London, the Cornhill. Finch Lane here, I'm guessing, is Fink's Lane from the 1520 map. And we'll head up here to the site of the house where Thomas Cromwell lived. I was watching Wolf Hall with the wife the other night, and she said, "Oh, Thomas Cromwell is a relative of Oliver Cromwell." And I was like, "Nah, I think it's just a coincidence." Or Exchange Avenue. That's what the city's like. I said, "No, it's just a coincidence." And I thought, because I thought I'd heard that before, when Wolf Hall started getting a lot of attention. Of course, for those of you who don't know, Thomas Cromwell is a real historical figure. It's a great historical novel by Hilary Mantel, adapted for the screen amazingly well. The second, or is it third series, is just started. I've only finished series 1. But it turns out, actually, Thomas Cromwell is actually distantly related to Oliver Cromwell, I think via his sister. So it's on his sister's branch of his family, and it's a few generations down. So I think he's like the great uncle of Oliver Cromwell, something like that. Anyway, but there is a familial connection, which is really interesting. So we've come out onto Throgmorten Street, which is where Thomas Cromwell lived. So here we have Crutched Friars, which I visited on a recent walk, and I will link to that below. And that was an enormous area of monastic kind of buildings and courtyards and gardens. And Throgmorten Street runs along one side of Crutched Friars. And it's here in Throgmorten Street, on monastic land, that the famous Thomas Cromwell, one of the key advisors to Henry VIII and the principal character in Hilary Mantel's Wolf Hall and in the TV adaptation, played amazingly by Mark Rylance. He had an enormous mansion here, which he lived in the early 1520s. So at the time of the map, of the Tudor London map, it was an enormous mansion of over 50 rooms, had courtyards and gardens and specialist rooms there. He was an incredibly wealthy man and an incredibly significant person. A lot of people credit him with being one of the key figures in the Reformation of the Church in England. I wonder if the house he lived in is marked in any way. It burnt down in the Great Fire of 1666. I wonder if there's some kind of plaque. So the home of Thomas Cromwell is a great place to end this walk in Tudor London using the wonderful 1520 map. which is I highly recommend. I'll see if there's a link to the shop at the Charterhouse Museum. If not, why not use that as an excuse to go for a visit and pick up a copy of the map. You can get them in other sort of museum shops as well. It's an amazing document, and this is just, we've just skimmed the surface. As the map itself says, the map tells a vivid story, but it is by no means the whole story or the complete story, and here we've just skimmed the surface. Maybe this is the beginnings of what will become a series of walks in Tudor London. Maybe. I mean, I wanted to get over to the area around St Paul's and Barnard Castle and the Blackfriars Monastery and all of that. So, you know, this could become another series, a bit like the City of London churches, and we've covered some of the same terrain but looked at it through completely different eyes. So I'd just like to thank you for joining me on that walk around Tudor London. Thanks to my amazing supporters on Patreon and my YouTube members here, and as I always like to say, I look forward to seeing you on the next walk, wherever that may be.
It's over the meadow, over the stream, it's where I am going and where I have been. It's been a long day now, it's time for a beer, and now for home, of course I must steer.